I'm about to install the starter motor on this 1979 TransAm VIN code K, which means it has the Oldsmobile 403 engine. Here's a starter motor. As a typical General Motors starter motor, it mounts from the bottom vertically up into the engine block itself, as opposed to a Ford starter motor, which mounts horizontally, going directly into either the bell housing or the transmission case. The difficulties with this one is I won't know until I install it whether or not I get grinding and need to install shims between the two mounting bolts here to adjust the spacing between the gear and the drive gear and the driven gear. Now, one of the difficulties of installing this starter motor is obviously it's pretty heavy, and when the starter motor is installed, it's very difficult sometimes to access the main lug for the battery, the one for start, and if you're installing one on a car with points, you'll have to wire this in right here. Now, this is the typical starter motor bolt. You can see the length here. Sometimes if I don't have access, I have longer bolts that'll mount the starter motor up, let the starter motor hang for about an inch or two down extra, but make sure you get enough thread engagement. This way I can access those bolts, but that shouldn't be a problem. I also run some heat insulation. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it in the back there, where I run the starter motor positive cable, the wire to the purple wire to make it start, and in this case I had fusible links that ran up. I disconnected the fusible links and install them to a manual breaker right here. In this case, I chose to use a 75 amp breaker. Now, the vehicle comes with a side post battery. The problem is, on this Pontiac, they put the positive over here on the far outside, and that doesn't leave much room between the positive terminal and the inner fender well. That makes it a really tight squeeze to get the side post battery terminal on. In this case right here, I originally used some adapters that look like this, that I can mount the side post of the battery to, that I can mount the side post battery cable to. But I'm in the process of changing that for a couple of reasons. One, there are two types of side post battery terminals. One is the aftermarket one, which gives a little bit of contact between the battery itself, but what always happens is the bolt that you have to put it in there, every time you take it out, it usually falls, or at least it falls for me, and they're always a pain to find because they get stuck somewhere in the fender well, and we go from there. The original General Motors style one, which is a better type of cable right here, really doesn't have that much contact area. So I'm going to switch to a top post battery cable. Now, top post battery cables, the drawback are that they're easily, they can get some corrosion on it, so you need to keep it clean. But in my opinion, look at the amount of surface area here that you have compared to either this or the factory General Motors style cable. So I'm going to switch this vehicle over to a top terminal. I'm going to run whatever wires I need additional for ground. I could also run a positive lead off here if necessary and bypass what was the fusible link to that junction block, and away we go. So summarize it real quickly. Starter motor, you have to install it, and sometimes you need to get to the battery cables right here. You can place it a little further down so you can get to these connections, make them nice and tight, and then move on. And in this case right here, based on this application, I prefer a top terminal so I could readily see them, have ready access to them, and away we go.